In this video, we'll show you how to update a table using PHP 7 and MariaDB 10. To do this, we are going to create a new file. Let's call it update.php. If you just got to this video, look at the video description underneath and you will see how I connected to the database using this file, how I created elements in the users table, and how I read elements from the users table. This video is about the update. So to update, the first thing we need to do is we need to connect to the database. So we'll require once the connection to the database. Please make sure you watch the previous videos if you have not seen them. We're going to do a try catch because we're going to interact with the database and we will always get an exception if something goes wrong. The exception, we call it EX in this variable. You can call that variable whatever you want. And then we can just show the exception by echoing it. If you call this EXX, this will be EXX. To update an element, what we need to do is we need to tell the PHP backend which element we want to update and with which data we want to update it with. To do this, I'm going to pretend that we get the ID that we want to update. That will be the element, the user ID. So we can say I want to update the user with ID 1 or the user with ID 5. So for now, this ID is going to be passed via post and is going to be passed inside the variable ID. We also need to know what data we want to change. You cannot change the ID, it's impossible. The database will not allow you to do that. But we can change the name, for example. And that will come in a variable post contained in name. Just a quick test. I'm going to echo the ID, save it, go to Postman. I'm going to point now to, sorry for that. I'm going to go to the update page. And this is going to be a post because I'm passing sensitive data update. And in the body, I am going to pass the name that I want to update. And for now, I'm just going to put a letter X in there. Send it. It says that I don't have the index ID, the variable ID. So therefore, I will pass the ID to be 1. Now we have the ID 1. The order of these elements doesn't matter. It can be moved like this. It doesn't really matter. So now we have the ID as the, I was hoping I could just throw it in here. Yes, so it doesn't really matter, ID 1. And I'm going to do a quick test. I'm going to echo the name and the name is X. So what I'm trying to do is the following. In PHP, my admin, if I browse the data, you can see that the first element with ID 1 has the name A, and I want to change that name to the letter X. To do that, I have the ID and I have the name, but now I need to create the query. The query will be pointing to the database and we tell the database to prepare a statement. The statement for an update says update set where. That's how I always do it. I want to update the users table. I want to set the name of it to be the new name. And the new name, I'm going to put it in a placeholder that I happen to call name. But you can call this, for example, temp name if that's what you want. It makes more sense to just call it name. And I want to update it where the ID equals. And here I also want to use a placeholder called ID. This name is the placeholder that will contain the real name, and this ID will contain the real ID. So once I have prepared the statement, let me just save it and for now test it. There are no errors, that's good. Now we need to bind the values. So we will say that the query is going to bind a value, and the value that we want to bind or replace is the name placeholder, and we want to replace it with the real name. We do the exact same thing for the ID. So I will say that I want to replace the ID. I will do the ID up here now. And we replace it with the real ID. So this is set up for us. It is totally secure. We're using PDO. No one can do SQL injections as for today. And what we do is we want to execute the query. Execute. We save it, and now we're going to test it. You're not going to see anything displayed here. Well, base table of view not found, table crowd user. All right, doesn't exist. I was not expecting this bug, but it's good that we see it. You can see that we go to the exception, and the exception is actually telling us the mistake. And I do not have the table called user, it's called users. Save it and test it. Now there's no feedback going back to the client, but if we look in the database, we have the name A, and if I reload, now the name is actually X. Once you have updated any value, most likely you want to see how many elements were updated, how many rows actually were affected. To do that, there's a function that I will show you now. I will just call it updated rows, and the function is called from the query row count. This function here will look at the query and it will see how many rows were affected. I save it. Now you're going to see that I'm going to try to change the ID 1 to the letter X, but it is already the letter X. So when I send the post request, nothing was affected because I did not make any changes to it. If you see here, the letter is X. Now I'm going to change the ID 2 to the letter Y. So it's no longer going to be 2B, it's going to be 2Y. We go to Postman, we say that we want to update the ID 2 to the letter Y. I'm going to send the request, and now you can see that one row was updated. This is the function that tells us how many elements were actually updated. In the next video, I will show you how to delete from the users table.